Welcome to the trial design section. This section is used when traits are evaluated and selected based on data obtained through proper experimental designs. For stages where traits are selected or culled through quick visual assessment, please refer to the phenotype screening section, which was covered in the previous video of this tutorial. In this section, you will detail how your experimental data is collected. It is divided into 3 subsections: experimental unit, layout, and check strategy. Let's go ahead and fill out this section for our example breeding program. In our case, we begin selecting based on experimental data in the F6 generation. In the first column, we indicate the conditions under which the experiment was conducted. In this example, the condition is the field. Next, we specify the experimental unit. For this example, let's assume we're evaluating plots, and we'll record the dimensions of the field plots being used. After that, we need to select the experimental design. Bear in mind, if none of the predefined options for condition, experimental unit, and experimental design match your specific breeding scheme, you're free to type in a custom description that best fits your experiment. Following this, you define the number of locations and number of replicates per location. The totals for experimental units will then be automatically calculated in the following 2 columns. Now let's move on to the check strategy. This is where you specify how many checks you're using to manage spatial variation in the field. These are your spatial checks. And how many checks are used to account for variation across seasons and years, your temporal checks. In our example, we have 2 spatial checks and 1 temporal check. For illustration purposes, let's assume that each of the 3 checks appears once per location. So the number of check units per location is 3. When check varieties are replicated multiple times, just fill in here the total number of experimental units per location allocated to checks. The percentage of check units per location is then automatically calculated in the next column. Finally, we indicate how connectivity between different trials is maintained. In our example, we are using spatial and temporal checks. And since the material has already been genotyped, we also use the genomic relationship matrix to connect the trials. With the trial design section now fully completed, we can move on to the next section: phenotyping, evaluation, and selection.